Reading through the Bible in 1 year. August 6th, Judges chapter 20, Acts 24, Jeremiah 34, and Psalms 5 through 6. All the Israelites. Once again, we're going through this book. There are still more chapters to go. This last story in here is kind of the culmination of the end of the entire book of Judges. Remember, the book of Judges is a view into what happens when you abandon God, and that's exactly what we're seeing happen with these people. We've had so far all these stories of great judges who are used by God to save the people. The people fall into idolatry, and immediately after they fall into idolatry, they come back to God, and God sends them a judge who rules over them to remind them to serve God and to pursue the things of God. So they know these things. But the minute that the judge dies, they go right back to idolatry. And the cool thing with this book is it's not talking about just one place, one city that keeps doing this. It goes through these snapshots of different places all over Israel where the same thing happens over and over and over. And so what we're seeing here is, like I said, it's the culmination. It's the end of the entire story. It's the end of this is how bad things actually got. So up to this point, there's still one more chapter to go after this. But up to this point, we've had the story of a Levite, right, one of the priestly class, who had a concubine, which is a slave that you're kind of functionally married to. She has more rights because you're sleeping with her, and if you decide to be done with her and to send her away, she doesn't have to pay anything for her, kind of like a ransom to get her out of her slave binding to you. You just let her go, like you would let anyone else go. So that's kind of the rules for a concubine. So he has a concubine, and she runs away from him and goes back to her father's house. Her father loves her and wants her to stay. So when he comes to get her back, he keeps his, and at the beginning of the book, rather, at the beginning of the last chapter, it referred to the Levite as her husband. And the father referred to him as his son-in-law, as you would in marriage, right? So this is what we see. The way that the husband, this Levite, treated her like his wife, right? And it was seen that she was the wife. However, when they left, they ended up going into Benjamin, and when they were staying the night, they had they found a city to stay in. They could have stayed in Jerusalem, or what would have been Jerusalem. It's a city of Jebus. They could have stayed there, but they wanted to stay in an Israelite town with Israelite people. And when they went into this Israelite town, what happened was, the men of the city, well, they found a place to stay. The men of the city came by that night and demanded that the man be sent out so the men of the city could rape him all night long. Well, the man refuses and tries to shove his daughter outside, his young virgin daughter, sending her out, let them rape her all night long. But the man ends up, the Levite ends up taking his concubine and thrusting her outside and shutting the door and going to bed. In the morning, she has been raped to death. Her hand is on the threshold as she was trying to get back to her husband. He takes her corpse, loads it on the back of his donkey, goes home, cuts it up into 12 pieces, and sends the 12 pieces out as kind of a traveling road show of the split pieces of Israel, showing how Israel has completely been broken apart by all of these things, sent out for the purpose of shocking the people into action against this. But he doesn't refer to her as his wife, but simply as his concubine. Look what happened to my concubine. And the last question is, what are you going to do about it? So here we are again in verse 1. All the Israelites from Dan to Beersheba and from the land of Gilead came out, and the community assembled as one body before the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all the people and of all the tribes of Israel presented themselves in the assembly of God's people, 400,000 armed foot soldiers. The Benjaminites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites asked, "Tell us, how did this evil act happen?" The Levite, the husband, again, see the term, of the murdered woman, answered, "I went to Gibeah in Benjamin with my concubine to spend the night. Citizens of Gibeah came to attack me and surrounded the house at night. They intended to kill me, but they raped my concubine, and she died. Then I took my concubine, and I cut her in pieces, and I sent her throughout Israel's territory, because they have committed a wicked outrage in Israel. Look, all of you are Israelites. Give your judgment and verdict here and now." Then all the people stood united and said, "None of us will go to his tent or return to his house. Now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will attack it. By lot we will take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of every 1,000, and 1,000 out of every 10,000, to get provisions for the troops when they go to Gibeah in Benjamin, to punish them for all the outrage they committed in Israel." Again, they should have gone to God. They should have asked God what to do, but they're making these decisions on their own. Why? Because there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own mind. That's what we're seeing. So all the men of Israel gathered united against the city. Then the tribes of Israel sent men throughout the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What is this evil act that has happened among you? Hand over the wicked men in Gibeah so we can put them to death and purge evil from Israel." But the Benjaminites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. Instead, the Benjaminites gathered together from their cities to go to Gibeah to go out and fight against the Israelites. Now we have tribe fighting against tribe. They're defending these men who wanted to rape him to death, and instead ended up raping his concubine to death. On that day, the Benjaminites mobilized 26,000 armed men from their cities. Besides, 700 fit young men rallied by the inhabitants of Gibeah. There were 700 fit young men who were left-handed among all these troops. All could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Now, there's a whole thought behind the point of them being left-handed. Some people take this to mean that they were, because the term is the child of the right hand, or things the right hand of God. The thought is that anybody who is left-handed is either homosexual or who is a, what's a good way to put this? Basically just a wicked, evil person. Or, that's what I think, they're just left-handed. It just happens to be noted here. Right, but these are thoughts that people have had about this, just putting it out there so you know about it. You can read the notes on the side that kind of go into some of the detail on this. There isn't really a whole lot here. You can go back to when we were in chapter 3, verse 15, to see the note that was on that one, but we're not going to get into it now. So, they had these troops who were very excellent shots with a sling. The Israelites, apart from Benjamin, mobilized 400,000 armed men. Every one is an experienced warrior. And they set out, went to Bethel, and inquired of God. Finally, for the first time in this book, we're seeing people inquiring of God, asking him what he thinks they should do. And the Israelites asked, not should we do this thing? Not, is this something that you would approve of, us going to war against these people? Not, God, will you please punish these people for what they have done? No. They come to God with a very pointed question. Who is the first one for us to fight against the Benjaminites? So the Lord answered, Judah will be first. In the morning, the Israelites set out and camped near Gibeah. The men of Israel went out to fight against Benjamin and took their battle positions against Gibeah. The Benjaminites came out of Gibeah and slaughtered 22,000 men of Israel on the field that day. But the Israelite troops rallied and again took their battle positions in the same place where they positioned themselves on the first day. They went up and wept before the Lord until evening, finally starting to repent a little bit, and inquired of him, "Should we again attack our brothers, the Benjaminites?" And the Lord answered, "Fight against them." On the second day, the Israelites advanced against the Benjaminites. That same day, the Benjaminites came out from Gibeah to meet them and slaughtered an additional 18,000 Israelites on the field. All were armed. The whole Israelite army went to Bethel, where they all now wept and sat before the Lord. They're finally starting to get it. They fasted that day until evening and offered burnt offerings and sacrifices to the Lord. Then the Israelites inquired of the Lord. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant of God was there, and Phinehas, and the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, was serving before it. The Israelites asked, "Should we again fight against our brothers, the Benjaminites, or should we stop?" Finally asking the right questions. The Lord answered, "Fight, because I will hand them over to you tomorrow." So Israel set up an ambush around Gibeah. On the third day, the Israelites fought against the Benjaminites and took their battle positions against Gibeah as before. Then the Benjaminites came out against the troops and were drawn away from the city. They began to attack the troops as before, killing about 30 men of Israel on the highways. One of which goes up to Bethel and the other to Gibeah through the open country. Yep. The Benjaminites said, "We are defeating them as before." But the Israelites said, "Let's flee and draw them away from the city to the highways." So all the men of Israel got up from their places and took their battle positions at Baal Tamar, while the Israelites in ambush charged out of their places west of Geba. Then 10,000 fit young men from all Israel made a frontal assault against Gibeah. The battle was fierce, but the Benjaminites did not know disaster was about to strike them, because the Lord defeated Benjamin in the presence of Israel. And on that day, the Israelites slaughtered 25,100 men of Benjamin. All were armed. Then the Benjaminites realized they had been defeated. The men of Israel had retreated before Benjamin because they were confident in the ambush they had set against Gibeah. The men in ambush had rushed quickly against Gibeah. They advanced and put the whole city to the sword. The men of Israel had a prearranged signal with the men in the ambush. When they sent up a great cloud of smoke from the city, the men of Israel returned to the battle. When Benjamin had begun to strike them down, killing about 30 men of Israel, they said, "They are defeated before us, just as they were in the first battle." But when the column of smoke began to go up from the city, Benjamin looked behind them, and the whole city was going up in smoke. Then the men of Israel returned, and the men of Benjamin were terrified when they realized that disaster had struck them. They retreated before the men of Israel toward the wilderness, but the battle overtook them. And those who came out of the cities slaughtered those between them. And they surrounded the Benjaminites, pursued them, and easily overtook them near Gibeah toward the east. There were 18,000 men who died from Benjamin. All were warriors. Then Benjamin turned and fled toward the wilderness to Rimmon Rock, or the Rock of Rimmon. And Israel killed 5,000 men on the highways. They overtook them at Gidom and struck 2,000 more dead. All the Benjaminites who died that day were 25,000 armed men. All were warriors. But 600 men escaped into the wilderness to Rimmon Rock and stayed there for 4 months. The men of Israel turned back against the other Benjaminites and killed them with their swords, the entire city, the animals, and everything that remained. They also burned all the cities that remained. And that is it for all the notes from there. I'm going to make sure that you can see all of the notes because there are, again, quite a few here. All right, there we go. Let's move on to Acts 24. 5 days later, Ananias, the high priest, came down with some elders and a lawyer named Tertullus. A lawyer doesn't mean like lawyer like we know it, he's just an expert in the law of God. These men presented their case against Paul to the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus began to accuse him and said, We enjoy a great peace because of you, and your reforms are taking place for the benefit of this nation because of your foresight. We acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with utmost gratitude. But so that I will not burden you any further, I request that you would be kind enough to give us a brief hearing. For we have found this man, Paul, to be a plague, an agitator among the Jews throughout the Roman world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes, Christians. He even tried to desecrate the temple, and so we apprehended him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to discern the truth about these charges we are bringing against him. The Jews also joined in the attack, alleging that these things were true. When the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, Because I know you have been a judge of this nation for many years, I am glad to offer my defense in what concerns me. You can verify yourself that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. It didn't find me arguing with anyone or causing a disturbance among the crowd, either in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor anywhere in the city. Neither can they prove the charges they are now making against me. But I admit this to you. I worship the God of my ancestors according to the way. Again, another name for Christianity, which they call a sect. Believing everything that is in accordance with the law and written in the prophets. I have a hope in God, which these men themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection, both of the righteous and the unrighteous. I always strive to have a clear conscience toward God and men. I lost my spot. Oh, there we go. After many years, I came to bring charitable gifts and offerings to my people. While I was doing this, some Jews from Asia found me ritually purified in the temple, without a crowd, without an uproar. It is they who ought to be here before you to bring charges if they have anything against me. Or let these men here state what wrongdoing they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Other than this one statement, I shouted while standing among them, Today I am on trial before you concerning the resurrection of the dead. Since Felix is well informed about Christianity, he adjourned the hearing, saying, When Lysias the commander comes down, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion keep Paul under guard, though he could have some freedom, and that he should not prevent any of his friends from meeting his needs. Several days later, when Felix came with his wife, Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and listened to him on this subject of faith in Christ Jesus. Now, as he spoke about righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix became afraid and replied, Leave for now. But when I have an opportunity, I'll call for you. At the same time, he was also hoping that Paul would offer him money. So he sent for him quite often and conversed with him. After 2 years had passed, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix. And because Felix wanted to do the Jews a favor, he left Paul in prison. And that is all the notes for there. Let's go on to Jeremiah 34. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord when King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, his whole army, and all the kingdoms of the land under his control, and all other peoples were fighting against Jerusalem and all its surrounding cities. This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says. Go, speak to King Zedekiah of Judah and tell him this is what Yahweh says. I'm about to hand this city over to the king of Babylon, and he will burn it. As for you, you will not escape from him, but are certain to be captured and handed over to him. And you will meet the king of Babylon eye to eye and face to face. Again, this is super important. It comes up. And you will go to Babylon. Hear the Lord's word, King Zedekiah of Judah. This is what Yahweh says concerning you. You will not die by the sword. You will die peacefully. There will be a burning ceremony for you, just like the burning ceremonies for your ancestors, the kings of old who came before you. O Master, will be the lament for you, for I have spoken this word. This is the Lord's declaration. So the prophet Jeremiah related all these words to King Zedekiah of Judah in Jerusalem, while the king of Babylon's army was attacking Jerusalem and all of Judah's remaining cities, that is Lachish and Azekah, for they were the only ones left of Judah's fortified cities. This is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah from the Lord after King Zedekiah made a covenant with all the people who were in Jerusalem to proclaim freedom to them. As a result, each was to let his male and female Hebrew slaves go free, and no one was to enslave his fellow Judean. All the officials and people who entered into covenant to let their male and female slaves go free, in order not to enslave them any longer, obeyed and let them go free. Afterward, however, they changed their minds and took back their male and female slaves that they had let go free and forced them to become slaves again. Then this word of the Lord came to Jeremiah from the Lord. This is what the Lord says, the God of Israel. I made a covenant with your ancestors when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery, saying, at the end of 7 years, each of you must let his fellow Hebrew who sold himself to you go. He may serve you 6 years, but then you must let him go free from your service. But your ancestors did not obey me or pay any attention. Today you repented and did what pleased me, each of you proclaiming freedom for his neighbor. You made a covenant before me at the house that bears my name. But you have all changed your minds and now profane my name. Each has taken back his male and female slaves who had been let go free to go wherever they wanted, and you have again forced them to become your slaves. Therefore, this is what Yahweh says. You have not obeyed me by proclaiming freedom, each for his fellow Hebrew and for his neighbor. I hereby proclaim freedom for you. This is the Lord's declaration. Freedom to the sword, to famine, and to the plague or pestilence. Again, that threefold destruction. I will make you a horror to all the earth's kingdoms. As for those who disobeyed my covenant, not keeping the terms of the covenant they made before me, I will treat them like the calf they cut in two in order to pass between its pieces. The officials of Judah and Jerusalem, the court officials, the priests, and all the people of the land who passed between the pieces of the calf, all these I will hand over to their enemies, to those who intend to take their life. Their corpses will become food for the birds of the sky and for the wild animals of the land. And I will hand over King Zedekiah of Judah and his officials over to their enemies, to those who intend to take their lives, to the king of Babylon's army that is withdrawing. I am about to give the command. This is the Lord's declaration. And I will bring them back to this city, and they will fight against it. They will capture it, and they will burn it. I will make Judah's cities a desolation without inhabitant. And that's all the notes. Let's go on to Psalms 5 through 6 now. Listen to my words, Lord. Consider my sighing. Pay attention to the sound of my cry, my King and my God. For I pray to you. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning I plead my cause to you and watch expectantly. For you are not a God who delights in wickedness. Evil cannot dwell with you. The boastful cannot stand in your sight. You hate all evildoers. You destroy those who tell lies. The Lord abhors violent and treacherous people. But I enter your house by the abundance of your faithful love. I bow down toward your holy temple in reverential awe of you. Lord, lead me in your righteousness because of my adversaries. Make your way straight before me, for there is nothing reliable in what they say. Destruction is within them. Their throat is an open grave. They flatter with their tongues. Punish them, God. Let them fall by their own schemes. Drive them out because of their many crimes, for they rebel against you. But let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them shout for joy forever. May you shelter them, and may those who love your name boast about you. For you, Lord, bless the righteous one. You surround him with favor like a shield. Now Psalm 6. Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger. Do not discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are shaking. My whole being is shaken with terror. And you, Lord, how long? Turn, Lord, rescue me. Save me because of your faithful love. There is no remembrance of you in death. Who can thank you in Sheol? I am weary from my groaning. With my tears, I dampen my bed. I drench my couch, or bed, every night. My eyes are swollen from grief. They grow old because of my enemies. Depart from me, evildoers, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my plea for help. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be ashamed and shake with terror. They will turn back and suddenly be disgraced. All right, that is all for today. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.